Now, David Haines travelled to Syria to help others, but while he worked to deliver aid to displaced people, as we all know now, he was kidnapped and he was later murdered by an Islamic State cell that was made up of those four men who were dubbed the Beatles because they grew up in Britain and spoke with British accents. It was a real shocker at the time to think of crimes like that being perpetrated by homegrown terrorists, if you like. Now, one of the group was sentenced to life in prison last week, and before that term was handed down, David's brother Mike faced him in court. Now, Mike joins us in a moment to talk about that moment and many others. But first, here's Liz Summers with David's story.
A brother, husband and proud father of two, Scottish aid worker David Haines dedicated his life to helping others following a career in the RAF. In 2013, he was working with a French charity in Syria when he was kidnapped by Islamic State. He was held captive with other Western hostages by a group of four men nicknamed the Beatles because of their British accents. A year later, he was beheaded by one of them, Mohammed Emwazi, a man also known as Jihadi John. Footage of the execution sparked outrage across the world.
David has been murdered in the most callous and brutal way imaginable by an organisation which is the embodiment of evil.
Emwazi was killed in a drone strike in Syria in 2015. On Friday in the US, Alexanda Kotey was given a life sentence for his involvement in the terror cell. The judge told him his actions were egregious, violent and inhumane.
Well, David's brother Mike joins us for his first interview since the sentencing. Very good morning to you. Thanks very much for coming in. What you said to this human monster was, you said to his face, you said, after the sentencing, you said, "Today I can say to you, you no longer have any power over me or mine, and I forgive you." And yet other relatives of people that were beheaded, as was your brother, said the very opposite to him as he left the court. Within spitting distance, basically, they went up to him and said how much they loathed him and how much they wished for him to twist and turn in agony for the rest of his days and burn in hell and all of that. How did you manage to find it in yourself to forgive someone who did something like that to such a good man as your brother?
After David was murdered, I felt, like all our families, like many people, felt incredibly strong hate and anger.
To the point where you wanted to do the same to him as he'd done to the brother? You wanted revenge?
All those involved, I would have murdered. Now, my family has a long generational history of serving in the military, and that feeling of hate scared me, that I would have had the ability to murder them. I tried to think, what was his murder about? It wasn't because he was white, it wasn't because he was Christian, it wasn't because he was humanitarian. He was nothing to them. And then it hit me, it really was an epiphany moment. It was the fact that they wanted me to hate, to spread hate. And then it hit me again that all terror attacks are about the spread of hate. And that was when I knew that I had to do something against the hate that I could see across our nation, across the world, these extremist groups of all types, not just the likes of ISIS, but also far-right and many other forms of extremism and terrorism.
Can I ask you what reaction facially did you get from this man when you told him that you forgave him? Did he acknowledge what you said in any way?
There was no acknowledgement whatsoever. However, he did blink.
Punishment, of course, is not yours, it's the court's. Can I ask you a really straight question? Despite your forgiveness, would you rather that he'd been put to death than simply jailed for life?
Absolutely no, sir. No. Never wanted, in fact, never wanted Emwazi to be killed or any of the others. Wanted them to face justice for their crimes, not also against David and his compadres, his cohorts that were held, but also the innocent people. David chose to go to Syria to help his fellow man, regardless of colour, culture, faith or politics. He chose to go there. Many other people had no choice and had to live under the brutality of ISIS and their likes, and still do. So it was I don't want to see them die. I want to see them face justice.
The impact on your family has obviously been devastating, hasn't it? Yeah. Not just the daily pain of the loss of a brother, a son, an uncle, a nephew, all the things that go with that, and the future that he would have had with your family. But you also directly feel like your mother and father's lives were taken by him. Just explain that. Yeah.
My mum, right...
OK,
it's
so hard,
just take a beat.
My mum, right away through the whole process from when he was taken to when he was murdered, was incredibly strong. And my dad was a great support for me personally as the liaison between the government agencies acted and the family. When David was murdered, my mum slowly gave up on life. And she slowly faded away until her death.
And your dad's dementia as well?
He had the first stages of dementia. In the 48 hours that after I told my parents, my family, that David had gone, his dementia got so much worse. I lost a great deal of my father. And again, he slowly faded.
And that's the devastation and the wider impacts of these horrific crimes have on all families. Yeah. You now go into schools, don't you? Dressed like this. You say this is your sort of preaching outfit, if you like, with the bow tie and the suit, a real symbol of an older generation, yes, if you like, even though you are young yourself. And you try to get that message of turning hate to love through. And just very briefly, if you can, say how you approach it and the light bulb that goes off in the youngsters' eyes.
Through Global Acts of Unity, we have presented to over 100,000 people, hundreds of schools all over the nation and beyond. The effect is quite incredible. I start off by, I want to tell you a story of two brothers, and I take it to the point of where David's kidnapped. And I say, I had to tell our
you show
family.
Pictures of you as kids and
yes,
all that.
Family slides that they're always, as all family slides, they're meant to focus, they squint, and usually generally embarrassing.
And that relates the kids to it. And
there's something in it that hooks them. And we get pin drop silence. And I take it to the point of where he's kidnapped and say I had to tell our family, our parents, and you can see the audience, whoa, he's talking about his brother. And then you can feel the emotional journey, the anger, the frustration, everything that I felt to the point of his murder.
Yes.
And then the second part is all about the rejection of hatred.
Yeah.
The realisation that hatred is a natural feeling.
Yeah.
But acting on hate
is
the difference.
A choice.
And can I just ask you one more question, taking us back to the trial?
Yes.
Very briefly. You finally set eyes on this man.
Yes.
This figure, this monstrous figure that had haunted you for such a long time. Just briefly, what did you think the very first moment you saw that face?
I expected to feel anger.
Yeah.
I expected to feel hate. My family and I had talked over our impact statement and the importance of forgiveness. And actually, when I faced him, it was grim satisfaction that he was in a court of law where his legal rights, his civil rights, his human rights were held up to the highest degree.
Right.
And that was important to me and my family. And it was a sense of closure.
Good.
Well, I'm so glad you have that sense.
Absolutely. And I know that you're very keen to make clear that this is not an anti-Muslim position. This is an absolute message from hatred to forgiveness that we should all feel when we get those moments in our life. It's an extraordinary tale that you tell, and we just wish you well with the lifelong grief and process that you'll be living.
I have to say, this has been a very brief meeting. I wish we'd had more time, but you're one of the most remarkable people I think I've ever met, and I find your example of forgiveness quite extraordinary. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Thank you.